I will try to begin my videos by presenting the broad content of the video in the first few seconds, so that if you are interested you can keep watching, otherwise stop there. And I will put in the description down below the structure of the content of the video, so you can find the content that might eventually interest you and to see the broad structure, to have a clearer view of what I'm about to talk about. In this video I would like to discuss the relationship of cosmological evolution, which includes Darwinian evolution within itself, what I might call realism, the idea that consciousness is the product of the world, and its relation to idealism, which is the idea that the world is a product of consciousness. And to put the question very simply, if there is a God, and I know that there is, how do you explain Darwinism? Because the religious people who are interested in scientific matters tend to refute or to try to say that Darwinism is false, but they do not offer a convincing explanation of why and how it is false. If there is a God, how do you explain that God, if he created humans as they are without going through the process of evolution, how do you explain that he deceives us by pretending that there was a biological evolution whereas there was none? So how do you explain that? It's a good question. In a first part I will talk about the experience of God that I had in 2018. In a second part, I will briefly explain how you, whoever you are, you might elevate your consciousness and access spirituality, so to speak. In a third part, I will try to explain that evolution, whether cosmological, biological or historical, follows a rational pattern. In a fourth part, I will briefly explain the need to actualize Hegel's philosophy, to incorporate the post-Hegelian development into Hegel's philosophy, and that this movement is precisely the actualization and the becoming wirklich, actual or effective, of Hegel's philosophy. I will discuss in a fifth moment the need, in order to have a clear view of the process of being, to publish the structure of Hegel's philosophy of nature, and to publish the structure of the empirical sciences as the modern scientists conceive of them, and to try to, in the longer term, to collapse and to collide and to unite and to unify these two views, to see whether or not Hegel's view of the philosophy of nature was correct, and whether or not the modern empirical view of science is correct. And they must eventually coincide if truth is to be found. And finally, I will put at the end of the video, or down in the description below, the link to the structure or the plan of Hegel's logic. So that was for the brief presentation. I will begin my first part by saying that those who are followers of this channel are probably already familiar with this idea that in August 2018 I had an experience in which my consciousness, I had been on an intellectual journey for 2 years of intensive reading, studying, watching videos, thinking, and the result of this intellectual process, which had become spiritual, is that I entered the mind of reality, what Fichte, the German philosopher, calls the absolute ego. And I had the experience that my consciousness became one with the whole of reality. And I called this experience God, because if one can become aware of the totality of reality, of the whole universe, to attain what could be called cosmic consciousness, if this is not God, then I don't know what God is. So I call this the experience of God. And I realized that the world, the universe, reality, with everything it contains, was the manifestation of my mind. And this is an idea that I know is true, but that I myself do not believe because it's unbelievable. So I am conflicted because I know the truth, but I am unable to explain how it is even possible. So that's why I struggle to convince others, because I myself doubt not the truth of this idea, but the plausibility, so to speak. Okay, second moment. Being. And being can be said of anything that is. The universe, whatever. Is a process. It's a movement of gradual evolution, which consists in becoming aware of itself. Being is in relation to itself. We are within being, and the world that we perceive around us is our being. And I say it is my being because I am a consciousness. And we, whoever you are, we are moments in the process of being, becoming in an accessing an infinite relation to itself by thinking itself. And this is a spiritual totality which is not conscious of itself. One might say that God is asleep, so to speak. And the idea that I want to share is that if you, whoever you are, if you want to understand yourself in this process, you first have to adopt a realistic or a realist view of things, namely the idea that your consciousness, your mind, what you experience to be yourself, is the product of all the determinations of being which are logically structured. And I will begin by nature. Nature is the realm of time, space, movement, matter, energy, and so on and so forth. So that you are the result of, the scientists said broadly, 13 billion years of physical and cosmological evolution. And you are the product of this cosmological evolution, because, just to take an example, the atoms which constitute your body are made of stardust. They were created, according to modern science, by the explosion of a star. You are also the product and the result of broadly 4 billion years of biological evolution. And your body, the structure of your organs and of your brain, contain and are the result, in this scientific, realistic, chronological view, of the evolution of all your ancestors, humans, pre-humans, mammals, pre-mammals, amphibians, or whatever, the first primitive cells, whatever. And then you are also the result and a moment in the development of what Hegel calls spirit, which is the realm of human activity. And it contains, among many things, anthropology, which is a continuation of the natural determinations. So you are partly determined by your ethnic and socio-biological being, and your soul, which is in unity with your body, contains the determination of who you are as a body and as a socio-biological being. And then there's the realm of objective spirit, which is, to simplify, the realm of economics, law, sociology, politics, and history. And you are a product of the historical development of spirit. You are determined to be a certain mode of consciousness within the unfolding of world history. And you are determined by your political views, by your socio-economic status, by your education, by your country of birth and the legislation of your country, and so on and so forth. And finally, you are attracted to and also a product of manifestations of art, religion, and philosophy. You are spontaneously, every thinking human who is capable of thinking is attracted by artistic expressions, by religious feelings, even if it is atheism. Atheism, by being the negation of religion, is religious in this non-religious aspect of it. and philosophy, and you, whoever you are, you have tendencies, and there are songs that you like, or movies, or plays, or the kind of dances, or sports even, who are a form of modern pop culture. You are spontaneously attracted by maybe Christianity or Islam or atheism or animism or the New Age or whatever, and you have spiritual leaders that, depending on your level of culture, might be philosophers or teachers who preach, in a way, philosophy. So the idea that I want to express, that I have already expressed in some other videos, is that if you want to reach spiritual consciousness or divine consciousness, which is a non-dualistic consideration of things, so you have to let spirit or the divine become one with you. If you want to reach, and it is not you who wants, it's spirit who wants to become conscious of itself through you, you must first go through this cosmological, chronological, realist process. And when you do attain a higher level of consciousness, you will realize that everything happens in the present, and that truth is eternal. And the very notion of time, the categories of time, space, traditional causality, and duality, they kind of vanish. And this is the speculative moment when you realize that the whole cosmological development is kind of illusory in a way, but it's a necessary illusion because it enables one to conceive of oneself as a moment in the process of the development of being. So, yeah. Third part. I believe, from my perspective, which is idealist, that evolution, whether cosmological, biological, and or historical, is rational in a sense that it is a way that what I call my higher self, which is reason, which is the absolute ego, which is not yet God, but in the process of becoming conscious of its divine self, so to speak, projects backward by a process that I don't understand, but projects backward its own history, the story of its own development. And I've already mentioned this in other videos. Darwinism is an illustration of an alchemical process. And alchemy is the idea of transforming lead, base metals, into gold, into noble and pure metals. And Darwinism is the process of transforming non-material chemical processes into simple primitive organism, and to develop them into thinking, higher, highly organized mammals and humans who are capable of thinking and reflecting back on their own development and becoming the thinking agency, the thinking capability of the universe itself, and offering nature the ability to reflect upon its own development. And the phenomenology of spirit by Hegel is the process by which consciousness, by beginning by a simple relationship to the world, by being plunged into a world which is just being, a world which is, and whatever consciousness can say and think and apprehend and comprehend about the world is that it is. And by seeking to know what the world is and what consciousness itself is, consciousness would develop ever higher, more complex, more incorporating views of being, and which will go through science, art, ethical life, legislation, politics, religion, philosophy, and consciousness will elevate itself to the consciousness of God. And this is an alchemical process and a Darwinian process in the realm of consciousness and thought. And that's why, from an idealist perspective, the chronological development of being, although from my perspective I do not believe that it is really real, I nonetheless acknowledge that it must be conceptually incorporated within the understanding of the process of reality becoming conscious of itself. And just to take an example, I do not believe in Darwinism, but I nonetheless acknowledge that the psychological determinations which are offered and explained by sociobiology are powerful explanatory factors in the determinations of the soul, and that in order to study our own soul, if we study the psychological determinations of sociobiology, we understand others and we understand ourselves, how we function. So it is as if the body and the soul really had underwent the process of evolutionary Darwinism. Yeah. Part 4. The formal aspect of Hegel's philosophy is abstract, negation, concrete. Something is isolated. It is abstract. It lacks a true relation to self, and therefore it turns into its own negation, and it produces its own negativity. And from this negation of itself, it comes back into itself, into the primordial moment, which was abstract, but after having incorporated the negation of itself, and now it is more complete, wealthier, more fulfilled in a way. This is the formal movement of Hegel's philosophy, which we find all over the development of logic, nature, and spirit. And my claim as a cultural Hegelian is that this method, this recipe, must be applied to Hegel's philosophy itself, that Hegel's philosophy, the philosophy of the 19th century German idealist thinker, is abstract. It needs to find its own negation, which is the development of thought and of world history and of philosophy and of sciences for the past two centuries, which are negations, either direct refutation or negation in the sense that it continues to develop Hegel's philosophy. And a third movement must be the return to Hegel, the incorporation within Hegel's system of all the post-Hegelian development and negative moment. And this return to Hegel, this coming back to Hegel, is precisely the movement which makes the philosophy of Hegel effective and wirklich, and this is what gives its truth to Hegel's philosophy. That's what I know to be true. And to illustrate with the title and the topic of this video is that the idea that Hegel produced a philosophy of nature which was supposed to be a rational presentation of nature as the reflection of what he calls the logical idea, which is the mind of God. And the attempt was to deduce the content of nature from the knowledge of the abstract mind of God, which is the logical idea. But my claim is that the discoveries and the unfolding and the development of science, whether physics, cosmology, biology, and chemistry, and etc., over the past 200 years must be incorporated within the speculative frame of Hegel's philosophy of nature, and eventually to correct Hegel's philosophy if it was lacking and not correct, or to confirm whether or not the purely rational deductive approach is in adequation with the empirical aspect. And my claim is that the history of science itself is rational. It follows a rational pattern, and I am not knowledgeable enough as an empirical individual, but I'm sure that if a knowledgeable scientist was aware of the basic fundamentals of Hegel's philosophy, if he understood broadly the philosophy of Hegel, he would be able to give an account, a rational account of the development of the history of his own science. That's a bet. I cannot prove. We will see eventually. So, yeah, fifth part. I will publish, probably my next video, the formal structure, the plan of Hegel's philosophy of nature, with the most important moments, the chapters or the sections or the points, not the contents, but just the structure, in German, English, and maybe French, the three languages that I broadly speak or at least understand. And I will publish just below, the video might be quite long, the structure, the formal conceptual structure of modern empirical sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, to simplify. So the purpose is to see whether the two modes of thinking about nature can coincide, can collide onto one another. If Hegel's philosophy is conceptual and true and is a reflection of an eternal truth, then the empirical aspect of science must eventually coincide with Hegel's philosophy. And if it is not, it means that Hegel's philosophy was in need of being actualized to incorporate the development of the modern empirical sciences. And in both cases, truth will emerge victorious. So yeah. So I will publish a video. It will not be very interesting, but I will come back myself to this video to just to have a view of the whole of the philosophy of nature, which might enable one to classify more easily, to find more rigorous movement within the conceptual development, to understand things better, to have a plan. The plan is not the territory, the map is not the territory, but it can enable one to find one's way without getting lost too much in the process of the conceptual development. And finally, sixth part, in the description below, I will put the link to the free videos that I published, which are just moving text. So it's not very interesting. There is no sound, there is no commentary. But the three moments of Hegel's logic, the logic of being, the logic of essence, and the logic of the concept, and to then again to see, to objectify a broad view of the development of logic, which, according to Hegel, transforms itself, manifests itself, reflects itself in nature. And I am not saying that the structure is correct, but I am seeking to verify, to check if it is, to correct the structure if it needs correction, because Hegel himself, there are various structures of the logic and of the philosophy of nature. There are various editions with changes. So if we are seeking the truth, and we are, because God is the truth and God is seeking himself, we need to test the knowledge and see where it might lead. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share for now. So yeah.